Hello, welcome to Suit Up with Terrence Lehue. I am your host and metaphorical haberdasher. On the show, we talk about what it means to become fit for every opportunity, and I like to think this is the podcast of heroes. So today, we've actually got something really exciting for you. We're doing an interview with Michael Monson from Grizzly Pulp, a pulp publisher, and they have published two incredible pulp novels so far, Nympho Lodge and Mad for Kicks, both by Jack Lynn. We talk in this episode with Michael about the history of Grizzly Pulp, how he got involved in the pulp fiction, lowercase letters, industry, and we also dig a little bit into the history and background of the two books they've published so far and what is next for Grizzly Pulp. We also discuss one of my favorite whiskeys, so stay tuned for all that and more in our conversation with Mike Monson. Mike Monson, welcome to Suit Up Philosophy.
Hello, Terrence. You want to tell everybody what your pulp name is?
Terry the Law. And I just have to let people know that this has been one of the most fun lead ups to a podcast interview I've ever done, in that we connected on Instagram and it was absolutely delightful. You sent me the books, but also a little card that said, Terry the Law is now a part of the Tokey Wedge, was it Knuckles and Lost Love Club? Yes. That is just so cool. And by the way, we are posting this on YouTube as well. So if you're listening and you can't see it, check out our YouTube channel so you can watch it there.
Yes, and I'll send you actually the PDFs for it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that way you'll have it.
See, and this is one of the things that I just want to be very clear, I think is awesome what you are doing with Grizzly Pulp. And I'll, of course, ask you to talk about it all in more detail, but I'm a swag guy. For better or worse, I love when you can do all those little extra things to make the things really cool. Like when the last James Bond film came out, No Time to Die, they cranked the swag machine up. And I think it was just because it'd been so long that the film kept getting delayed. They kept having to make more. It wasn't a choice. They're okay, we have to make something else with the name on it. But we have a shot glass, which we're going to be talking more about later. I mean, you get coasters, magnets. These are the things that I love because it's not just, the books are amazing and I will always be a book guy. But this is even a comment I made about writing. There aren't a lot of cool, fun toys when it comes to writing. And there isn't genuinely for fans, unless it is Harry Potter, unless it is Star Wars, unless it is something that's a franchise, there isn't toys or fun stuff that goes along with the brand.
Yeah. Wanders is really into basically merchandising and also, giving you the same premiums that you would get inside of a Cracker Jack box. They got to figure it out.
So let's talk about pulp fiction, first and foremost, for people that are not aware of what pulp fiction is, because we're going to be using the term a lot. And they think it's a Tarantino film, which it's a great Quentin Tarantino film. But could you give us just a basic idea of what pulp fiction in these lowercase letters would be?
Much lowercase letters. So I could tell you about the kind of the dirty back alleyway of pulp fiction.
Is there anything other than the dirty back alleyway of pulp fiction?
Oh yeah. Well, and here's the thing, and anybody who's watching this right now, just take this into consideration. Before there were VHS tapes, there were pulp books, because you could go to a bus station, or you could go to a newsstand, or you could go to a liquor store and you could pick something up, and it had consumable content that you could take and consume it in privacy. Just like somebody, going to, go pick up an X-rated VHS. You can get it, you could put it in your coat pocket and just go walk out. So it literally, the kind of the roots of pulp is that it was something that was a mass market product that was out there. And then beyond that too, it had a little bit of something for everybody. So, if you go to our Instagram feed, you'll see Ann Bannon. So Ann Bannon is a really well-renowned lesbian pulp writer. So if you were a lesbian and picked this book up, even though it was a little over the top with content, you would read something and take something away. It made you feel better about yourself. People like Victor Banis, Victor Banis wrote gay pulp, but his was very, tongue in cheek. He did like The Man from Camp, which is a wonderful series. And so pulp, it has its roots in an awful lot of hard-boiled fiction. It has its roots in noir. It has its roots in just about everything. I mean, it's that tree, for some genres, it's like a telephone pole. Mm-hmm. This one, it goes out all over the place and the roots are deep. So when somebody says pulp fiction is this, it's really hard to pin down. And I think that's what's at times can be very frustrating for people because they like something to be very linear.
Yeah.
I know mystery, but then I'm like, yeah, but you read Chandler and you can't figure out what the fuck he's talking about.
So, those are not things to solve.
No. And that's the beauty of it is that, especially with the pulp that I always liked, it was great because it did have adult content in it, but it was all set up, mm-hmm. and then nothing. Blue Ball Express. And then it wanted you to go to like the next chapter and she takes her bra off. And he or she gets into some sort of confrontation. But at that point, it just keeps on. It's a tease and a tease and a tease. Yep. And the really good small pulp publishing houses, they got it, which was you just give them just enough. And again, the allegory that I always use is why buy a dairy farm when you want a glass of milk? Yes. A good publishing house was like, you know what? I'm going to give you that glass of milk. I'm not going to give you the dairy farm. So, and the particular publishing house I've always been a huge fan of, where we, got the whole idea to republish the Tokey Wedge series was Camera Arts out of Chicago. And Camera Arts, they started off early 1950s doing magazines. So they had access to an awful lot of photographs of like artist models and things like that. So, and that's the way you could be able to get it on a newsstand. And at that point, it became successful enough where they started doing men's magazines. Mm-hmm. And then from the men's magazines, they probably had an epiphany that, we always have a little bit of writing in it. Why don't we just use that basically as a tease for the next books that we have? And so at that point, it's kind of off to the races. That's where you ended up with their two publishing arms, which was Novell, which is what Tokey Wedge was published on, and then Merit, which was another one. Merit has a little bit of infamy because they got caught with plagiarism.
Oh no.
Yeah, well, hey,
I mean, at that time, eh.
Yeah. So, but unfortunately, the plagiarism was for the Shel Scott series, and they didn't like it. And there's a whole other story attached to this. I if we just talk about that, it would be hours just going into it. But just moving forward, they stopped publishing books in the mid 1960s, and at that point, then they kind of they branched out. They got a little bit harder in their content with the adult material. Mm-hmm. They had kind of a rag that sort of was like a Al Goldstein Screw magazine, and then they got a little bit into doing a little bit harder content with the men's magazines that they had. But the bread and butter for them was always going to be the tabloid, the Tattler, mm-hmm. the National Tattler. And anybody who's a fan of the Buffalo Bill and his little merriment that he had, within that series, that's always kind of a focal point they have, is that Buffalo Bill does his latest thing in the National Tattler. So, and that just leads right into Grizzly Pulp, which was, unfortunately, when you get dragged into the Illinois Supreme Court and you don't want to pay the money, the best thing to do is basically just dissolve everything. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what happened. So all this outstanding content fell into the public domain. And, and again, Tokey Wedge is I think it's safe to say, and a couple other people agree with it, which was Tokey Wedge. The reason why I liked it is I could tell this was a parody of Pulp, because just the way it's written, a lot of people, when they read it, they're like, "Oh, this is terrible. This is garbage," and it's just like that's tongue in cheek. But
so I have to interrupt here real quick for two things. First, foremost, when I'll be honest, so like the first one, so you've published 2 books so far, Nympho Lodge and Mad for Kicks. The first Nympho Lodge, because I wasn't familiar with Tokey Wedge,
right?
And I'm saying there, I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this. And sometimes, because I'm like, it's because I know what I'm thinking. Like I'm the serious person who, when I talk James Bond films or books, I'm like, oh, I like From Russia with Love, my grounded, normal Bond. And I'm like, this feels like it's doing that kind of like very grounded lingo, but I know that he's saying everything with a smirk. But by the time I got to Mad to Kicks, I'm like, I am on board. This is entirely, I know what this is now, and I am so on board for this because Tokey is a delightful hero, I think, in the story. And I want to dig a little more into that. But first and foremost, I do want to like circle back here. How did you get into Pulp? How did you have an interest in this? Because at least, I mean, I did not, and it took years for me to get to the point where I was like, oh, I found this like little niche that I absolutely adore. How did you find this? What was the introduction?
The introduction was around 1982, and Miriam Lena from Norton Records and Kicks, she had a little fanzine that came out about pulp books. And the name of it was, and I have the t-shirt here, it's called Bad Seed. And you can kind of see everything that's there. And so I just saw that, and it was over at I think Tower Records. They had it over in their magazine rack. So I just went over there, and of course, I'm picking up like Flip Side and Maxim Rock and Roll and, whatever magazines were there, and, Fangoria. And then just see this thing, and it spoke to me. Because it was just so odd. And just like you, I seriously believe that this was bullshit, that no way these books could exist. And the way that she did it was like, it kept on, everything was a tease, and it didn't really give you everything you wanted to know. But she put out a couple of issues of that. And by putting out those issues, that sparked my interest. I also was going to high school at Berkeley at the time. So at that time, Berkeley was well known for basically having more bookstores than any other place, really, in the United States, I think, at one time. So you go to like the Shakespeare and Company, you go to Moe's Books, you go to Cody's, you go to Black Oak. And so you just have to, if it was used, you just have to kind of go in the back where they would have that. You couldn't find these particular books if you went to Goodwill. You can't find these particular books if you go to a garage sale.
Yeah.
Or if you go to an estate sale. These are things that Grandpa put in his sock drawer. And after he passed away and the grandkids are going through, they are, immediately going, we don't want anybody to know about this. So an awful lot of those books are lost to the sand at times because people just, got rid of it. So, and then moving forward, I got into the just like anybody else who gets in the book trade, you start doing one thing and then you just end up, doing this. So I've been doing it for 35 years. The connection that I have to Grizzly Pulp, which the parent company is Grizzly Press, comes from Don Ellis, and Don was the publisher for Black Lizard. And Black Lizard, as I can be able to tell you, these books right here, you see everything by Jim Thompson. All of Thompson's books have fallen into not only just into public domain, but just disinterest. So Don saw an opportunity and was able to get most of Jim Thompson's books for $500 in 1980s numbers. So, and in particular, what was it? The Grifters, they made that into a movie. A great movie, by the way. Anybody who's watching this right now, I highly recommend it. But because of Don's publishing arm that's out there, so that got people interested in hard-boiled fiction and noir, and then that sort of kind of it sort of sputtered a little bit, but then you end up, with like San Francisco, Eddie Mueller having Noir City and things like that. So it just kind of intermingled. So when I came into the business with him, in the back of my head, years and years ago, I'm really happy to say that the people that I told back when I was a teenager and kind of in my early 20s that I wanted to be the Russ Meyer of pulp books, they didn't laugh at me. Russ Meyer, I found out through somebody that and I believe it was Mike from Something Weird, because I asked him, hey, do you have Faster Pussycat Kill? No, I don't have it, but RM Productions have it. And you can go ahead and just call. And usually, and Russ will be on the phone. And so sorry, what? So if you look behind, you'll see the Russ Meyer, Hall of Fame that I have over there. And I think I blurted out to Russ Meyer, I want to be the Russ Meyer of pulp books. And he didn't laugh, and I was fortunate enough to write fan letters to the Cramps because I really liked the Cramps. And Lex wrote back to me, and I told him at one time, who want to be the Russ Meyer of pulp books? And he didn't laugh at me. And same thing goes for Mike and Lisa from Something Weird. I told them, who want to be the Russ Meyer of pulp books? And they didn't laugh at me. Billy and Miriam, same thing too. So that's kind of, it's sad that an awful lot of the principals that made me what I am today, they're no longer with us. So that's the reason why I try to, anytime when I'm talking about Grizzly Pulp, tell people you should really check out the source material. I highly recommend that anybody go to Norton Records. Go check out what Miriam's doing. She's a fantastic wealth of knowledge. And then in addition to that too, Lisa, up in Something Weird Video up in Seattle, by all means, please, check it out. They have great content. Everything is all, as everything is all kind of intertwined.
Yes.
It all kind of comes back to one thing. And even, Mike from Psychotronic, Mike Weldon, I recommend that, you check out Weldon too, because Weldon had a part of that, because I picked up the first Psychotronic video guide and my mind was blown. And then again, years later, you start making the connections between all this content that's Psychotronic and all these things that are in pulp. And you begin to realize that probably an awful lot of the writers who did that there's a Venn diagram where it kind of meets in the middle. So there you go. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying, how did you get interested in pulp?
Well, I don't think that people really do appreciate how much pulp is, because again, like you made the comparison to with VHS tapes.
Yes.
These are books that existed as like the consumable media at the time. There was no YouTube, there was no TikTok, there was no Instagram. This was the commodity of the day for entertainment. And those magazines were like the prompts to get into it. And it's utterly amazing to me. There's the original Nympho
Lodge. And then there you go. And the thing I always like to tell people, and also the other thing that really got me interested in punk rock, because punk rock really kind of opened the floodgates to all of this. You could be able to find a novelle book because you could be able to tell what it is from a distance, because it looked like nothing else. Mm-hmm. I've always liked to tell people that novelle and merit books are basically the Danger House of pulp. So if you know anything about Punk 45s and Danger House, they had a distinctive look. And they basically kind of kicked off a market of just having small releases, interestingly done, handmade, outstanding graphics, but they always were distinctive. And same thing goes for these guys over who did this. I wish I could have used the original artwork, but
I do want to bring up the artwork though, because I'm holding up, this is Mad for Kicks, the current one that you guys released, looks fantastic.
Thank you.
And then here is the Nympho Lodge, which I have to give like huge kudos, because I love the fact you have these slip covers.
Yes.
We've discussed, I'm a fan of Hard Case Crime, and they also have these fantastic covers. But the thing is, like, my family, or if I'm in an airport, oh dear goodness, trying to read a beautiful Robert McGinnis covered book in an while I'm on the plane and I have the judgmental little old lady sitting next to me going, what is he reading?
Yeah. The slip cover was Dan's idea, and it's an outstanding idea. And it was to kind of make it special. And again,
I think that like this is something I miss about VHS tapes. I think they had amazing covers, and the current like covers on a Blu-ray usually suck like so much.
Yeah. Vinegar Syndrome, though, I got to admit, those guys, they got it figured out because they turned the clock back and said, well, this is what worked on VHS. So let's go ahead and do exactly the same thing, on DVDs. And of course, they're shrewd, there's the markup. Well, it's a slipcover, but you have to pay an extra $5.
Yes.
Chef's kiss. Good going. Folks.
Good marketing.
Yeah, good marketing. But again, I mean, by having this, it means that you have a distinct look.
I mean, really, it does. This is such I mean, like, I'm not the person that's a design person. When I came up with my book, I was like, I have no idea what I want to do for a cover. But the colors on this just stand out beautifully. It makes it like a really nice collector's piece.
Yes.
Me as the person who likes to vaguely organize my books by topic, and I'm always annoyed when I can't get the colors to like fit right. The way that you have this, I can line them all up on the shelf and they look perfectly aligned, but then I'm not losing out on having an amazing cover.
Yes.
In reality, and I do want, again, talk about these covers. So these are not the original ones. These are ones that you guys had come up with. Tell me a little bit about this.
Well, I'm really fortunate to have family members who always liked me. And Jim Silk was sadly, just there's an awful lot of people in my family who passed away, but Jim is still out there. He's still cranking away, and he's in the bottom side of 90. And so Jim Silk is my uncle. And so part of the business plan that I had for Grizzly Pulp was, okay, we need new covers. Who do I know? Jim. So, and Jim is kind of one of the last living legacies for that particular era, because he did Pulp art. He was friends with Frank Frazetta. He, as much as I think Jim will probably deny it, I've always thought that he probably was what's the best way to put this? For the Rocketeers creator. Okay. I believe that he took a look at what Jim was doing, and Jim was an inspiration to him. So Dave Stevens, as much as I think that Jim Silk will say, no, he wasn't my protege, I have always believed that Dave Stevens was Jim's protege. So I had somebody within the family in order to do the art, and plus somebody I can have a good relationship with. And as you know, one of the key elements, if you're going to be doing design, you have to have a good relationship with your designer. You just can't say, well, I just want a girl there and she's gonna be holding a gun, because you'll end up with, again, I mean, there's an awful lot of well-meaning people that are out there that are doing small press, print on demand, redoing pulp books, but often the covers kind of cut the corners a little bit, but that's okay, because it's that the beauty of pulp was doing that. I mean, case in point, these guys over here, they would just cut it out of whatever magazine they had, slap it on there, put some stuff on, put a little bit of ad copy, and shoot it out. But with Jim, I was very fortunate to have somebody. And please, follow Jim Silk, Silke, on Instagram, and just take a look at his feed. He doesn't do very much, but what he has is an interesting assortment. He was one of the people that helped rediscover Betty Page. So that's another story for another time, and this is not the time or place. So, but yeah, go ahead.
I was just so let's start talking about Tokey.
Yes.
How did you find Tokey Wedge? Like, when did you first interact with this remarkable hero?
Okay, so I think, to be honest with you, I think probably one of the Tokey Wedge books, and I can't remember which one it is, but I'm pretty sure that I shoplifted it from Shakespeare and Company. So, full disclosure, they had it over there. And so I just was like, they wanted $5 or whatever. And I was like, I didn't have $5, but I was like, shit, somebody's going to get this thing. And so I think that's what just the 5-finger discount and just 5-finger Freddie and just walked out of the bookstore. Hey, Shakespeare and Company there, in Berkeley. Hey, they had people that paid attention and they had other people that didn't pay attention. So I just saw an opportunity and just walked out. They're no longer there, so nobody come after me. And if you want a free copy of the book to make it up, then I'll slip like a 20 in it or something like that from inflation. But yeah, that was the first thing. And so I can't remember which of the books it was, but I remember reading Tokey Wedge and thinking, okay, well, this is kind of like that guy, Shel Scott, and this is a little bit like Mickey Spillane. Mm-hmm. And you know what? It was one of the covers that had a picture of him on the back or something. A long time ago. It's like 80, 82, 83. But I remember reading it, and then just like you, like, this has got to be bullshit. Even in my like teenage mind, I was like, this can't be, like, Mickey Spillane is over the top, mm-hmm. And so, and the Shel Scott series was a little bit more highbrow and a little bit, but still had an awful lot of the very tongue in cheek. But this just the beauty of Tokey Wedge, and you could attest to this, is just they throw the rules out. And I should probably just have a little bit of a background on who the author was. Mm-hmm. So Jack Lynn is the author that does appear on it. Jack Lynn was the pen name for John Vanderveer. John Vanderveer was just a meat and potatoes writer. I mean, he was a newspaper editor down in Texas. He was an editor for a couple of magazines, and then he passed away in 1979. The name Jack Lynn is his first wife, Jacqueline. So that's how you get it, because, hey, got to use something. So
that's brilliant to me, because I mean, I sit there every now and again when I'm trying to come up with character. I'm like, okay, so I've got what sitting. Okay, there's a book by Charles Johnson here on my shoulder. His last name's Johnson. Perfect. We're going with that.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Jacqueline is such a great homage for one thing.
It is.
And it's really a good pulp name. Like, it's really a good author name there.
It is. And, beyond that too, I mean, it's your ex-wife.
Yeah. So, why not?
Why the hell not? So I don't know. He got married a second time. He passed away in 1979, and that was that. So just kind of, moving forward with Lynn, again, he wrote other books that came out on Novell, and I believe he wrote one or two for Merit. And so he just was churning out content, and he occasionally, I believe, have a couple of the men's magazines that Camera Arts put out. So he would do a little bit of short stories and things like that. And the great thing about their magazine was they were teasing out the next book. Hey, the next Tokey Wedge adventure that was out there. So that's what just got me started. And then again, just from Novell book itself and Merit, because it's the danger house there. I mean, you can go find an awful lot of small publishing houses that are out there that did pulp, and everybody loves the Stanton covers. Okay. Everybody loves Eric Stanton covers, and everybody loves Gene Vilbrew covers. But these guys, they just were so off the wall and so fucking cheap, and it's just whatever it was that they had, that's what ended up on the cover. Occasionally they would go like kind of highbrow, and they would hire an artist to do something. But even the stuff that they did hiring an artist is just so just like off kilter that that's what was so wonderful about them. And again, so, circling back to Tokey Wedge, there's probably, I know we're going to be doing the 6, and there's probably 10 books within his canon.
Okay.
But there are other books that were written that, even though they're not Tokey Wedge books, they're pretty goddamn close to Tokey Wedge. And my feeling is that when the heat was on with those guys over there, where they got their wrist slapped for plagiarizing the Shel Scott series, they may have just said, somebody's going to catch on that you're doing the same thing with Tokey Wedge. We'll go ahead and just not call it Tokey Wedge Adventure, but you'll know what it is because it basically has.
It has the same elements, just
exactly. So like Legos, it's like, you just gotta put it all together and you know what it is. It's
that's a great description of what Pulp is. It's like Legos.
Legos, yeah. Or, like in kind of the case of what they did over Camera Arts, it's like Ed Emberley. So if you remember the Ed Emberley books, it's like, well, how do you draw a cat? Okay, well, you do a little box, you do a little circle, and then you do two little triangles, and you do a couple sticks there, and you do a little tail, and then and now you have a cat. So there you go. So Novell Books is the Ed Emberley of Pulp. Just it has all the elements that are right there.
So what made you decide that Tokey Wedge was going to be the start of Grizzly Pulp?
Because why not? Because the thing is,
that's a great answer.
I mean, just why not? Because it's completely unknown to most people. I've had a couple people that know me that have gone back and accused me of just saying, what you're doing, this is a JT Leroy, isn't it? You're fucking with people. Because we know you well enough to know that this is something that you concocted. Basically, it is something that didn't exist in the 1950s or 60s. This is an elaborate prank and hoax that you came up with. And that's multiple people have told me that who know me. And I'm just like, I wish I was that smart. But, maybe, like a decade from now, I could just go with it and just go, oh, yeah, it was me. There was no Vanderveer. There was none. It's like kind of blah, 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 blah. How many people are going to be going back, taking a look at the original copyright in the Library of Congress? Paquito. So, go ahead.
I just wanted to really point out to people first and foremost, because Nympho Lodge as a title, it is a provocative title, that's for certain. But I think that especially in today's day and age, you're going to have a couple people listening there like, is this a porno on Netflix?
Yeah. And as I like to tell people, when you read Nympho Lodge, very little in the way of nymphomania, more in the way of lodging. So much lodging that you can almost qualify to get a degree in hotel management.
Seriously?
Almost. Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. And it's basically, it does go room to room, which is good. It does. The lodge does play, a part within the story. It kind of goes off on that weird tangent where it's talking about a shoe heiress. And of course, that's where I kind of figured out the joke, because you have a last name of Wedge, which goes to a shoe, and then you have the shoe heiress. And I'm like, okay, I get it. So that may have been the first time, at least with that genre, that I had an epiphany and like, okay, yeah, Tokey. I don't know where the Tokey comes from, but the Wedge
is an odd name.
Well, because got to remember that he basically is, Mickey Spillane wasn't a tall man. So they just stumped Mickey Spillane and just took him down to, Tokey Wedge goes between 5'3" and 5'6".
Okay, yes. And I actually really want to point out that is one of the things I love about him as a character, because I don't know about you. I read most of the adventure books that I read. The heroes are always these dashing 6-foot+ guys that are typically, the all-American footballer type. And that's fine. But as a man who is barely average height at 5'8", I'm like, I like to have a character that is not, leaps and bounds taller than me every now and again.
Well, he may be short in stature, but he's large and in charge in other areas.
Yes.
And that's the joke. That's too, because, Tokey, maybe he goes between 5'3" and 5'6". As the joke says, not to scale. So I won't give it away, dear readers, but as much as you could be able to intimate, his gynecological area back in 59 and 60, they basically they do that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about Tokey Wedge is that he will meet up with a group of lesbian beatnik. she'll hook up with him. Then she becomes a raging nymphomaniac who then will tell him everything he wants to know.
Which is just, again, this is where, like, in a James Bond book, they'll have him sleep with pussy galore and make her straight. They went even more with Tokey. It's like we're jumping that up like another octave level. It's really, again, the books are very enjoyable. I very much enjoyed it. I think that Tokey is a delightful hero. And once you get you realize that there's that degree of the joke along with it's still like there's still a satisfying story. I mean, that's something I really want to make very clear to people. This is not just, it's like a spoof. It has a couple of those elements, but it's more tongue in cheek. It's still telling, like, okay, Mad for Kicks, I was very curious, like, what this story was going to end up being. And genuinely, it has blown me away with how, like, it's set up. Like you said, they do a good job of, okay, we're teasing this, then we're teasing that. And it just keeps escalating little by little to where you're like, wait a minute, this story isn't different than what I expected when I first opened the book, which that's the thing I love in a good noir story, especially a good hard-boiled story or a detective, is I like to feel that the pull where just that little bit more, just that little bit more, just that little bit more.
Well, yeah, it does that. I don't want to do any spoilers for book number 2. Book number 1's already out there. People have already done reviews. I'll talk about that until I'm blue in the face. Mad for Kicks came out on April 19th. So, in the interest of good Carney rules,
we are not going to spoil a darn thing. People
we're not going to
read it and enjoy it.
But if you want to know more, you're more than welcome to come to the blow-off tent over here, and I will show you the 2-headed cow and the pickled punks. So anybody's free to reach out to me. That's the one thing about Grizzly Pulp. I wanted to make sure that we're inclusive. And the thing that always really stuck with me growing up as a kid, and I have to circle back with what you talked about, the ephemera, just really quick. The person who taught me or instilled in me about ephemera being used for publicity of all people was G.G. Allen. G.G. Allen was a master at that. Before he had, before you would send him a money order to Kevin Allen, before he became self-realized as G.G. Allen, he was the master of that because he would send away for a cassette, and he would include tons of ephemera. He was a publicity hound and anything to possibly get. Of course, with Gigi, he also would do stuff like he would send me parking tickets, which I wish I had now. But he was a master of that. And so that sort of, got me thinking, okay, you do that. The coasters, that comes from Dave Kreider from Estrus Records, because Dave Kreider, he had a series of 45s that was out there. It was all based upon like beer and drinking and booze. So he put that in. I stole it from them. The stickers, that's kind of a no-brainer. The magnets are a no-brainer. The little ephemera that you put in, originally we had a poker chip and things like that. It's the same thing that they do over at Bad Seed. They give you a little switchblade over here, a little thing for a 45. So with all these people, when I was a kid, as a teenager, I was like, oh, this is really cool. I want to do that. So, and again, it's really good for branding to have, a pretty big sticker that has Grizzly Pulp. People might not know what it is, but they'll recognize it.
Well, and also I do want to shout out, you have a really great logo shield here, which I love it because for me, like I was a DC Comics. I still am a DC Comics guy. So like I'll read the old issues every now and again, just because I think it's really cool. It's like very much its own era. But it kind of reminds me of like that classic, just like old school shield that you'd see on different publishing companies. And I just think it stands out. Again, the color scheme works. I think it looks good, even down to the font design.
Thank you.
I think
the
that
font
it
was
really
designed
works.
by Jim Sill for Grizzly Pulp. The shield was actually designed by and I highly recommend that you check out the band Steel Pole Bathtub, because a member of Steel Pole Bathtub is also a designer too. He's a fantastic designer. and I'll send you the link so you can be able to post it up. He's the person who designed it, and probably the most pulpish record that ever came out is Steel Pole Bathtub's Tulip, which I just highly recommend. Highly recommend for anybody. They include, the band would play live and they would take stuff that from noir and from pulp and from cartoons, and they would play it, when they were performing live and on records when they're on Boner, and then as they moved up the food chain, the powers that be at larger record companies said, no, you can't do that. But yeah, Dale was the person who was responsible for designing that, and I thought it'd be a good idea, again, to go back to somebody that was a source of inspiration, because I remember Tulip was the thing that I was listening to it, and I was like, you know what? Let's do Grizzly Pulp, And again, so yeah, Tulip, great record. Definitely go check it out. But yeah, great logo. Jim Silk was the person who designed the font for that, and that's what's on the shot glasses, which we'll be doing pretty soon here.
We will. I want to ask one question before we break out the joy juice. I like any excuse for day drinking. This is my job, folks. It's great sometimes. Hey, that's what writers do, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
What's next for Grizzly Pulp? So we've got the first 2 Tokey Wedge stories. What's next?
Well, probably the next thing that's going to be coming out will be the 3rd book in the series. I'm not exactly sure, when that's going to be coming out. I have to be honest, sales aren't exactly, busting down the doors. We made a decision that we were not going to go the path of Amazon. I won't get into the politics of Amazon, but just know that, hey, if you are an independent publisher or if you're a writer, don't get yourself fucked over by, working with those guys over at Amazon to have them publish your book. Same thing goes for Ingram Spark. Stay away from them. Stay away from an awful lot of those print-on-demand publishers. They will rip you off and take advantage of you. And years ago, when I was working on the other end of the book industry, when people would come to me and say, well, I want you to publish my book, and I just knew that the content wasn't that good, and it just was not in me to take advantage of somebody for $5, $10, $15, $20, $25,000. I would call people in my office and I'm like, you want to know how to solve this problem? Sit down and I'll show you. And I would just say, if you want me to publish this book, you'll have to go out and you'll have to sell it by hand. You'll probably be selling out of your car's trunk. But if you want something really nice for your family to hand out to people at your funeral so they can remember you, then yeah, it'll be the best $20,000 you've ever invested in your entire life. If you want to be doing small publishing and independent publishing or just doing books, it's always good to find a legitimate printer who's been around. Our printer that we have they're fantastic. I mean, I get these guys they go above and beyond. They're amazing people, and I'll give you the link for
Please.
Them too. But again, anybody that's out there, if you're going to be publishing anything, stay away from Ingram Spark, stay away from Amazon Publishing, stay away from these people that promise you the moon, because it's just not that good. You can always reach out to Grizzly Pulp, and I can guide you in the right direction as best I possibly can. I can hook you up with people. Now, on the flip side is, I would love to have our books in bookstores, but Ingram's never really had any interest with us. Publishers Group West is actually, local over here at Berkeley. No interest whatsoever. But then under the age of COVID, suddenly I had an epiphany that putting your book in a bookstore, especially, that's part of the reason why we also made the decision to at least have this, because if they're going to be spining your books, it is distinctive and it sticks out.
Yep.
But independent bookstores are extremely risk averse, and they get to play with the money in the kitty, and that money in the kitty is accounts that they've opened up with Ingram. And and again, I'm going to do a knock on independent bookstores. So when you hear them bitching and moaning and complaining, how horrible it is for them, you know what? A lot of people don't have the luxury to have a line of credit with Ingram. So that way, if a book doesn't sell because of whatever reason, you could be able to return it and get a full credit. And those books end up coming back to us. And when they come back to us, they often are in unsellable condition, which means I basically either have to mark them out, destroy them, or if I have enough books, I have to go to a wholesaler like American Book Company and I have to eat it. The food chain for publishing is it cannot survive currently as it is. Before, and again, it's a whole other story, but the business before a certain point was when you bought a book, it was like a carton of eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to sell as quickly as possible. It wasn't like having an MRE on your shelf. People get that joke, an MRE on your shelf that has a shelf life of X amount, and you can just go, oh, you know what? People didn't like that particular one. I'll just go ahead and return it and be able to get credit and apply that credit towards getting the purchase of other books. That is when, and again, Ingram is the big dog out there in the field. They had no interest with us. And really, to me, the book selling doesn't mean you have to sell something in a bookstore. If you go to Grizzly Pulp, one of the reasons why I have the Grizzly Pulp Babes of the Week is that I realized my author died in 1979. So I don't have an author. Do you want to buy a book from somebody that looks like me or one of the girls that's out there? And that means that basically we can take the books wherever we want. We can go to a comic book convention. We were down in Los Angeles to do the LA paperback show that was down there. And I had a couple of girls along with Doc from Caveman Magazine. I had plans to go to Pulp Fest. We'll put a pin in that for now. Just know that Pulp Fest is not going to be on the menu for Grizzly Pulp ever. And beyond that too, traditional book selling is kind of gone the way of the dodo, and book selling now is being on like your podcast and being accessible. A lot of people go into bookstores and are intimidated by the booksellers that are in there, and that's bullshit. You shouldn't be like that. And again, I was very fortunate. I could be able to talk to people like Russ Meyer, and I was able to talk to Lex Interior. And I was able to talk to other people that were out there accessible. And that's what really was an inspiration. Static book selling I believe is kind of a dead end. But books are still out there. And I should also point out that we publish on pulp paper.
Yes, which is absolutely awesome. Just for the record.
Thank you. So when we say we're pulp books, we actually print on actual pulp paper. Now, Quentin Tarantino, for his book that just came out for Hollywood, he did that too. Shame on you. You stole from Grizzly Pulp. You have a name that screws with our business model whenever I'm to buy advertising in your book. It did that too. So you owe us. So Quentin, if you're looking at it right now, you need to contact me because we need to sit down and talk. I know you're retiring, but maybe I have one project for you.
Well, he's retiring, which means he wants to do more writing, and I'm sure that he would love to work with you guys.
Do any more writing, please. You know what? The world doesn't need more writers. It needs more Grizzly Pulp. It needs more people like you, Terrence. It doesn't need more writers. It doesn't need anybody that's like that. Anybody with Hollywood connections and things like that. And of course, not to crap on the book but it really wasn't a pulp book per se, but it was somewhat, marketed as that. I mean, it was basically a novelization of a screenplay, which was good. And it was his interpretation of it, and the book itself was actually, it had a lot of worthwhile, parts to it. But again, I mean, what really works, I believe now, and is essentially a vehicle that you have here and being on Instagram. And that's, I believe, where modern book selling is going, which is basically, if I worked in independent bookstores, the best days that you have is you do hand selling. You go and interact with people and you just say, get a basket. And who are you getting it for? Well, I'm getting it for grandma. What's grandma like? Okay, good. How much money do you have in your wallet? And then just shaking them upside down, trying to get as much as you possibly can. And that's essentially new book selling right now, at least in my opinion. So if anybody's out there that is a writer, anybody that's out there that's a small publisher that's there, you can always feel free to contact me. I'll give you as much help as I possibly can, point in the right direction. I don't like seeing new writers and small publishing houses getting screwed.
Mm-hmm.
And the quality that comes out isn't that good. You can, as Grizzly Pulp is evidence there, you can get a lot of bang for your buck if you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always a good idea also to print here in the United States. Don't have something published overseas because you just don't know what's going to happen, or down in Mexico and even Canada, which used to be very reliable, due to the paper tariffs that we have, really drove the business, kind of through the roof. So again, Grizzly Pulp does exist as being a publishing house, but also I'm available to anybody that's out there like yourself.
Thank you.
That would have any questions. I mean, 35 years, I think I may have picked up a few things. And Don Ellis,
I was going to say, I can thoroughly attest, you respond excellently on Instagram. Yes. So definitely people reach out if you're interested. And we're going to link all of your socials, obviously, in the show notes. And as much as I hate to say it, I think that you gave us a great transition point about the state of the publishing industry and talk about writer's tears.
Writer's tears. So the good folks over at Writer's Tears Whiskey, I have no qualms whatsoever, promoting your product. I do notice that you have an awful lot of writers there. They're very sad in your ad copy. Or it just is basically you're using, and again, you might have a professional photographer, they do great work, but it looks awful lot like Corvus images. I know that here locally, Fritz Holtag, you distribute this fine, delicious beverage, and I would say that both Terrence and I would absolutely be honored to. I'm not going to use the word shill, but promote your product to the hilt. I believe that the success for Writer's Tears comes from actually finding people that are writers and people that are actually drinkers, because the people who taught me, one person who taught me this business gave me some sage advice. He said, if you want to get a writer and if you want to get them under control, you go meet them at a bar, you get them drunk, you have them sign away basically a couple books on the back of a bar napkin. Okay, you pack them up in a taxi, you send them back to the hotel, you send them back home. You then send them you send them a case of booze with a note inside of it that basically says, I expect to see a book by the time you're done with this. And so with that in mind, Writer's Tears, I know what I'm talking about. I could be able to help you. Holtag, you're just over there in San Francisco. We're just over here in Kensington. We're really close. Work with us. We love your product. I endorse Writer's Tears. So, and back in Ireland over there, if you hear this too, our books are now available in the UK. So, and you know what? This week I started doing 25% off. So there you go. So you can't beat that. Use the code UK only. Good people over at Writer's Tears, UK only, and you'll get the book for 25% off. There you go.
I don't know about you, but I'm very excited to pop this bottle open.
Oh, good.
Oh,
look at you. I have a screw top over here.
I don't know. So actually, I just need to quickly add. So the store I got from is a local grocery store. They had it. And more importantly, they had it on sale for $7 cheaper than usual. And I looked at that and went, I need to get 2 bottles because the whiskey never goes bad.
Yeah, you always hear people that tell you, oh, well, you got to go, if you get a little bit of oxygen inside of it, you got to go drink it within a year, which I don't have any qualms about doing that.
That's never been a problem for me.
Never been a problem. Never been a problem. Skull, my friend, and to everybody else who's watching this out there, please, a cheers and a toast to you for supporting both Terrence and also Grizzly Pulp. Ready?
Indeed. Whew. Whew. Got my water
You're
ready.
Not much of a drinking man.
I am I'm not much of a shot man, to be honest. I'm the guy that fills I have my tumbler and I put about 2 shots worth and I will nurse it for about 3 or 4 hours.
Oh, that's good. Well, you get a little bit of oxygen in it, add a little bit of water. And as I said yesterday, I had to,
yes, you need to do a second shot.
I promise you I do a second shot because this interview was supposed to be yesterday. I had to go deal with coyotes and crows. And so there's a story to that, and nobody would be interested other than the two of us. So hang on.
Well, and that's what makes the legend so much better, right? It's the whole idea of writing is like you keep a little bit underneath the surface.
Yeah, well, Grizzly Peak is actually, not too far away from us here. I don't really know if there was any grizzly bears that were up there because the California grizzly bear is extinct.
Oh, so, that's right.
Yeah. So, but here we go. Grizzly Pulp, coyotes and crows. Perfect. Writer's Tears, an outstanding, very smooth whiskey.
That's honestly my favorite part about it. And it bothers one of my buddies he's a bourbon guy, and most bourbon is just a little bit too rough for me. I'll drink some of it, but not a whole lot. But Writer's Tears has like just the right level of bite and smoothness for me. I will be completely honest. This bottle was already opened. I opened it up the other night for like an hour and a half long writing session, and I just enjoyed putting words on the page while drinking Writer's Tears. It was chef's kiss.
Lou Longfell would be proud of you for sitting there and drinking, but then he probably would have called you up and also would have said, Terrence, where the hell's my book? Terrence, where is, I sent you all this booze. You signed a piece of paper for me on the back of a napkin. Come on. I'm not in this business for charity. And, this is not running some sort of bar or an establishment like that.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We will link to all of your stuff in the show notes. Again, I want to remind people, get Nympho Lodge, get Mad for Kicks. Both are incredibly good stories. And also don't shy away from Writer's Tears if you see a
Writer's Tears. And then the last thing, just know that if you buy a copy of Mad for Kicks, I will give you an official Tokey Wedge fan club, busted jaws and black guys. And also, follow our Instagram because we also have the girls up there, and they will have the brass knuckles, which we have here. Which, if anybody that's out there, I'll just leave you with this: buying brass knuckles you can't do that. It's against the law. You're a bad person. So what you're doing is you're looking for Indian paperweights.
Thank you. Because honestly, I was looking at your guys' Instagram and thinking, I want a pair of brass knuckles. Why don't I have a pair of brass knuckles? So
Indian paperweights.
I need to find Indian paperweights.
All right. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Terrence. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Mike, for coming on the show.
Outstanding. Thank you, everybody.
Big thanks to Mike for coming on the show. It was an absolute blast. I hope you enjoyed listening to it too. You can find Grizzly Pulp by going to grizzlypulp.com and by following them on all the socials. On their website, you can order Nympho Lodge and Mad for Kicks by Jack Lynn. Both fantastic mysteries. I highly recommend them. I've also linked Writer's Tears in the show notes, so if you'd like to try that whiskey, you can also. And Writer's Tears, if you need someone to sponsor, let me know. Again, please be sure to follow the podcast on the socials. We're on Instagram at suitup.podcast. You can also find our stuff on my website, terrenceleahy.com. If you aren't already, please subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe on whatever your favorite podcast player of choice. We're on all of them. If you enjoyed today's episode, the best thing that you can do is not only support Grizzly Pulp, but also support us by leaving a 5-star rating and review. Until next time, this has been Terrence Leahy and the Suit Up Podcast, wishing you a very happy Suit Up Sunday.